Good morning, bonjour, bon dias. My name is Shirleen Chin from Stop Ecocide International. Yesterday, here at the IUCN Congress, I found myself invoking a never-before-used rule in the Members' Assembly in an attempt to allow the Assembly to consider a motion to support the establishment of an international crime of ecocide. Maybe because the chairs of the session had never before had to deal with such a strong move, we were not given the opportunity to clarify the mandate we were seeking. Members were therefore unsure how to vote, and the substantive issue was unable to be heard. Here today, we have an opportunity to better inform the IUCN and the public of this important initiative to protect Earth's precious ecosystems, and we have some fantastic voices with us to do this.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Stop Ecocide International is developing global cross-sector support for establishing a crime of ecocide at the International Criminal Court, the ICC, as a way to prevent large-scale destruction to the Earth's vital ecosystems. We collaborate with diplomats, politicians and lawyers, but also with corporate leaders, NGOs, indigenous and faith groups, and grassroots campaigns around the world. This initiative is already being discussed in at least 15 member states of the International Criminal Court, some of which are also IUCN members, including its host country, France, which has committed to take action on it as part of its recently passed climate and resilience law. Support for this crime is also coming up for discussion in the UK's House of Lords next week, as the government's Environment Bill reaches report stage there. The establishment of this crime would, of course, support everything the IUCN does and stands for. Our motion would have urged the IUCN Assembly to encourage member states which are parties to the Rome Statute to consider the new legal definition of ecocide, which emerged in June this year from an independent panel of top international, criminal and environmental lawyers, co-chaired by Professor Philippe Sands, who is with us today, and to treat this new legal definition as a springboard for serious discussion on amending the statute to include this new crime, as was indeed explicitly called for at the International Criminal Court in December 2019 by the small island states of Vanuatu and the Maldives. We were told by the IUCN that the motion didn't fulfill the criteria of new, despite the very recent date of this heartfelt call from climate vulnerable states, and the even more recent launch of the new legal definition in June this year. We were told that the motion was not urgent and could be considered at a later date, despite the UN Secretary General's support for this new crime just a few weeks ago as highly desirable. And indeed, his dire warning that the recent IPCC report in August was a code red for humanity. One could hardly ask for a better definition of urgent. This was an opportunity for IUCN in a number of ways, an opportunity to place itself on the right side of history, an opportunity to acknowledge the work of top lawyers from around the world, including the new chair of its own World Commission on Environmental Law, Professor Christina Voigt, who was a member of the expert drafting panel. It was an opportunity to acknowledge the seriousness with which this initiative is being taken by states, and of course an opportunity to stand for the strong protection of ecosystems in law, in solidarity with future generations of all species, including our own. Sadly, for reasons we may now never know, this opportunity was not offered to the IUCN membership here at Congress. So at this time, we shall simply have to call publicly on all IUCN member organizations to keep a close eye on this fast-growing conversation, because we know it is only going to get louder. Thank you, and I shall hand over to Professor Sands for his thoughts.
Thank you, Shirleen, and thank you, Jojo, and how lovely to see Nick Robinson there. Very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Nick. So my background is I teach international law at the University of London. I practice in international courts and tribunals on the 4 crimes, crime of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, And I have also written a lot and worked with Nick over many years on environmental matters. I was very privileged to be invited to co-chair with a distinguished Senegalese jurist, Dior Fall Sallo, the working group to which Jojo made reference. That was about last November. And we worked together for 6 months. I'd not previously been involved in ecocide. The reason that I took on the challenge was it was a melding of two issues that I was interested in: international criminal law and international environmental law. And I felt that it was important at this point to do my bit in taking the law to protect the environment forward. And I believed, or had come to believe, that the criminal law is one instrument that could be used to assist in achieving greater protection of our global environment, whether it be climate or biodiversity or hazardous waste or other issues. We worked together for 6 months, and I was absolutely delighted that despite our very different backgrounds, we emerged with a consensus document, a definition of a new potential crime of ecocide that could be inserted into the statute of the International Criminal Court as the 5th crime. It was a pleasure and an honor to work with that group. I think we benefited from everyone's contribution. It was globally representative. It was substantively representative. There were people from across the spectrum, so to speak. And I think we were all very pleasantly surprised by the reaction to the proposal that we came up with. A large number of governments got in touch to say privately or sometimes more publicly they appreciated this work and they would engage in the effort to take it forward. As Jojo mentioned, the Secretary General of the United Nations himself, in short order, effectively endorsed our work and said that the statute of the International Criminal Court must be changed to include the 5th crime. It's a gap in international criminal law. The environment is not protected at all or protected adequately. And so these were all extremely positive developments, and I have no doubt that the Assembly of State Parties of the International Criminal Court is likely now to move forward with deliberations on what to do with the ideas that we came up with. The trajectory of history supports this idea. And I have to say that it reminds me of another moment in international law back in 1945, when a man called Raphael Lemkin invented the crime of genocide. He coined the phrase, and he worked long and hard to get the crime of genocide into the indictments in the famous Nuremberg trials that began 76 years ago. The judgment was 75 years ago next month, and he succeeded, despite tremendous opposition. And I think I wrote about this in my book, East West Street. I dug very deep into it, and I can't help but draw the parallels between the actions taken by the IUCN Congress in these past days and the naysayers from 1945, those who said, no, actually, the timing's not right, or we don't need such a thing, or it's pie in the sky thinking it's not going to happen. Well, they were wrong, and the IUCN Congress is wrong. I'm going to go very far in what I say. It is absolutely shameful and an embarrassment that the IUCN Congress, despite the efforts of the Pope, of the Secretary General of the United Nations, of many governments, of tens of thousands of people around the world, has not even seen fit to have a conversation about ecocide. The organization should be ashamed of itself. That is all I need to say for now. I hope it changes its direction very soon.
Buenos dias, amigos. Bonjour à tous, mes amis. I am very pleased to be with you, my friends. This is probably one of the most important press conferences and topics at this Congress. I was privileged to be, as our chair has indicated, at the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm. At this time, the Second Indochina War was raging in Vietnam, France the first, the United States the second. And in the corridors, there was great discussion about the use of a defoliant, Agent Orange, a chemical that destroyed the trees and all biodiversity as an act of war. There was also great discussion about using cloud seeding, that is making it rain, to modify weather, to change the conditions of war and under which war was being waged. Both of these transcended the need for military action. They were new kinds of weapons, weaponizing the environment, and they were alarming to the delegates, but it wasn't time to act right then. This was the first time the UN had ever taken up the right to the environment, as in the Stockholm Declaration on the Human Environment. But it resulted in the Environmental Modification Treaty thereafter, and in the Statute of Rome for the International Criminal Court, which raised the prospect that a crime like ecocide did exist, could be prosecuted by the court or before the court. We are at a very difficult time in the history of humanity and our relationship with the biosphere and nature. As the United Nations reported in its study last February, which you can find online from the UN Environment Program, called Making Peace with Nature, we have a triple crisis. We have huge amounts of pollution, worse than happened with Agent Orange, but it's insidious because it's all over the world. We have a great amount, vast amounts of biodiversity loss. And not just the extinction of species, but the thinning of all species so that there are fewer plants and animals to sustain the ever-growing number of humans. And then finally, we have the disruption of the climate with the attendant results that you all understand. So it's time to recognize that everyone is on notice. You are on notice officially, practically, scientifically, that if you take severe action to tip the scales, which are already out of balance, to tip the scales to gross and serious harm to nature and the biosphere and our ability to sustain the life we've evolved within the biosphere, then that is a criminal act. At this conference, this Congress, we have had 2 legal meetings on how to protect the defenders of nature. These are individuals like you and me who take action to stop predatory harm to the flora and fauna, the water resources and their source of food and so on. Last year and annually now, the United Nations reports conservatively 200 people are murdered, killed, while they defend nature. 18 in Mexico alone last year. This is unacceptable. Murder is a crime. Now, we need to do a better job prosecuting and preventing this atrocity. It's growing, it's not getting less. But we also have to begin to deter those who take the greater crime against the ability of nature in an area to sustain life itself. When I was the chair of the Commission on Environmental Law of IUCN, we said there has to be a better law to protect biodiversity. Back in 1986, we were told biodiversity is too complicated a word. No one will understand it. All the things that Philippe said that were negative toward ecocide were said against the word biodiversity and our proposed convention, a treaty on biodiversity. Yet we did prevail. So I believe that the work that is underway, not just in the Ecocide Foundation, but in organizations such as the International Council of Environmental Law, which I am a member, Philippe Sands is a member, Emilie Gaillard is a member. We are all working on this. There are other organizations working on it, and intergovernmental organizations will begin working on it. The fact that it did not emerge as a resolution in this Congress was the fact that the Resolutions Committee suppressed a great many resolutions, not just the ecocide one, because they were too conservative. For them, many of these topics, including the topic of the pandemic and zoonosis, the biological function of zoonosis, were too controversial for them to advance to the floor. I find this regrettable, but only temporary. We will proceed to advance the law and the law of the biosphere. We've gone beyond environmental law. We're now into a kind of ecological transition, into a new phase of law. But the progression that Philippe indicated in terms of genocide, crimes against humanity, when I was a student in law school, the crimes against everyday pollution were not crimes yet, but they became crimes. And we are in that process of trying to create standards for behavior, international standards for behavior, the breaching of which, or the transcending of which, becomes a criminal act, and there is accountability. So I welcome the studies that have been going on for some time now. I think we will move this forward both within the Commission on Environmental Law and other commissions of IUCN. And by the time we meet in 4 years again in the World Conservation Congress, I would expect we can see a significant appreciation of how to articulate ecocide and how to apply the crime of ecocide to deter future acts of ecocide. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
The idea that the IUCN, the preeminent organization that is supposed to deal with the protection of the environment, somehow passed on this at the crucial moment is an embarrassment. And I think those who are at the top really do need to ask themselves some long and searching questions about their role in how this could have happened, that they missed this opportunity. It really is shocking.
I would like to hear also from the audience if there are any questions.
Hello, my name is Samira Ben Ali. I'm a student that study future generations and future generation law. So my question is, I really thought when I was coming here that the IUCN was supposed to be the best platform. There was not supposed to be any better platform than this one to have those kind of decisions being made as a way to show us the way forward, the way to go. And I have been feeling, and with other people my age, a certain kind of frustration right now on how to act and how to go forward about all of those ideas. So I would like to ask, how do we do starting from now without I guess the help of those kind of platforms to move forward those ideas like ecocide? And do you think that maybe civil society is more appropriate to act, or NGO, but in the same time, we see that there are kind of blocked too?
The Council of IUCN has just been elected. It begins its meetings tomorrow, the new council. They are a new group that perhaps is more open to these questions, and they are authorized to adopt policy decisions before the next Congress. So I think the Commission on Environmental Law, the members that are concerned about this, can take up the point that Jojo made so well, that we have to articulate a decision and educate the members, in this case, the council, what action it needs to be taken as soon as possible. Ecocide not only may be available to hold those accountable for ecocide, but it is very important to articulate it to deter future acts of ecocide. Deterrence is a terribly important function of criminal law. It's the essential function. And so I think we can act. We just have to mobilize and be clear.